There's this really fascinating poetry collection called Eshu at the Library. And what it does is, well, it takes this one single, really powerful idea and uses it to connect everything from the pandemic to modern protests and our sense of identity. But to really get it, to unlock what the author is doing, we have to start with its namesake, Eshu. He's a Yoruba deity. And trust me, he is way more complex and controversial than you probably think.
So that's got to be our first question, right? Who or what exactly is Eshu? And the search for an answer isn't just some deep dive into ancient mythology. It actually opens up this incredible story about translation, about power, and how a single word can shape our world in ways you would just not expect. Okay, and right off the bat, we run into this huge contradiction. I mean, look at this. On one hand, you've got the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, who talks about Eshu as this complex, unpredictable force. He even calls him the dialectician of reality. But then you look at the other side, a missionary dictionary from 1843, and it's just brutally simple. Devil, demon, Satan. I mean, how can both of those things be true at the same time? Figuring out that clash, that is the key to this entire story. So to really unravel this mystery, we've got to go back in time. Because believe me, this isn't just some dry academic debate. No, this is the story of how one single word, translated at one very specific moment in history, went on to define and really to distort an entire culture. And here it is. This is the source, the origin point. We're talking 1843. A man named Samuel Ajay Crowther, who was a really respected linguist, the first African Anglican bishop, actually, he publishes his vocabulary of the Yoruba language. And right there, in that book, he defines Eshu with three simple but absolutely world-altering words: Satan, devil. You see, this one little entry, it wasn't just a translation. It was a complete reinvention of what the word meant. And believe it or not, that one definition from 1843 cast an incredibly long shadow. I mean, let's fast forward over 170 years to 2016. What do we find? That exact same mistranslation is still around, popping up on Google Translate and, as you can imagine, offending millions of people. It's this digital echo of a centuries-old decision that finally pushed the author of our book, Kola Tubosun, to go and track down the original source himself at the British Library in 2019. Okay, so if Eshu isn't the devil, what is he? Who is he? Well, let's dive into his actual role in Yoruba thought, and it's a fascinating one. He's seen as a kind of test, a living metaphor for ambiguity itself. And this really gets to the heart of the whole paradox, doesn't it? The author's friend once asked him something that I think a lot of us would wonder. If Eshu is just this harmless, just slightly mischievous fellow, then why do people pray to him, saying, "Eshu, do not harm me"? The answer, it turns out, is in a really famous story. So picture this. You have two friends, inseparable. They're walking together, Eshu comes along and walks right between them. Now here's the trick. He's wearing a hat that's red on one side and black on the other. So one friend, he only sees the red side. The other friend, he only sees the black. Later, one of them says, "Hey, did you see that man in the red hat?" The other one's like, "What are you talking about? His hat was black." And from there, well, the argument gets bigger and bigger until their whole friendship just shatters. Now, think about it. Eshu didn't actually do anything malicious. He's just introduced a little bit of ambiguity. And that is why people say, "Eshu, do not harm me." See, it's not a prayer against some evil devil. It's a plea to avoid that kind of test, to avoid having your reality, your friendships, your beliefs stress tested in a way that shows how fragile they might be. Eshu isn't evil. He is the chaos of perspective. All right, so now that we get the metaphor, let's bring it all back to the poetry collection. How does the author, Kola Tubosun, use this idea? Well, he takes this powerful metaphor of Eshu's two-colored hat and he applies it to our modern world, a world turned completely upside down by dislocation, a pandemic, and huge social protest. So the whole structure of the book actually mirrors this test from Eshu. It's split into three parts. First, there's white, which is about his time in London and that feeling of dislocation. Then black, which dives right into the global uncertainty of the 2020 pandemic. And finally, red, which confronts the raw injustice of the #EndSARS protests. So that first section, white, it's set in London while the author's on a fellowship. It's a time of quiet observation, him grappling with language and history in the very library where that old dictionary was kept.
It's all about that personal test of perspective, that feeling of being an outsider looking in. Then we get to black. And this part is all about the arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic. And all of a sudden, the entire world is just thrown into this state of ambiguity and fear. Remember that feeling? What is true? Who can you trust? What's going to happen next? That massive global uncertainty, it's a perfect example of Eshu's disruptive energy at play. And finally, the book turns to red. And this is a really raw response to the #EndSARS protests and the Lekki tollgate shooting in Nigeria. And here the metaphor becomes just tragically literal. You had citizens on one side who saw a peaceful protest met with deadly violence. But on the other side, the state was presenting a completely different reality, denying that anything had happened at all. It was a brutal, bloody test of truth itself. So, when you put it all together, the collection really lands on this incredibly powerful idea that memory itself is a crossroads. It's a place of conflict, a place of choice, just like the parables about Eshu. It suggests that the battle for our future really begins with the battle over how we remember the past. The author puts it so well. He compares Eshu, trapped by one definition in a 171-year-old book, to our own memories. He says that how a memory is deployed is what determines what's lost and what's gained, and that completely reframes how we think about history, right? It's not just about what happened, it's about the story we all decide to tell about what happened. And that really leaves us with a huge final thought, doesn't it? The story of Eshu is a really powerful example for sure, but it makes you stop and wonder, what other truths, what other entire histories and ways of seeing the world are just locked away right now, waiting to be rediscovered, all inside a single, simple, mistranslated word?